Hi, I'm Emma, and this is my birth way. If you've seen the other two videos, you'll know that I'm video documenting my journey and my husband's journey to get pregnant. And the last two videos, you'll notice I was a lot more excited. And I'm not as excited in this video because I'm not pregnant. But I was. So it's sort of a weird time right now. It's been 2 weeks since I recorded the last video, which was the maybe I'm 2 weeks pregnant video. Largely just because it's been a little bit emotional. Even though I was barely pregnant. So let me just give you the spiel. Soon after I recorded the last video, I started to get faint pink lines on the pregnancy test. I mean, I just knew it. I just had a feeling a couple days after, I think, the video. I just had a feeling. Things felt different. And then the pink line, too. And I'm thinking, are these evaporation lines? But it was happening every time, so it wasn't. But they weren't really getting darker, the pink lines. And I know in the beginning, the first few days, sometimes they don't. But they weren't getting darker after almost a week of, doing the test. And so this didn't really make me nervous, but it just made me feel confused a little bit, like maybe implantation was taking longer, that kind of thing. I also started having brown discharge, like light brown discharge, and I don't think I mentioned it. No, I probably did mention it in the last video that there was a little bit of brown discharge, but this lasted for 10 days. And I think because I was in the middle of that, I didn't feel like recording a video because I mean, the tests were saying positive, but it was just still, everything didn't feel quite right. Like, I don't know how you're supposed to feel when you're pregnant, but it didn't feel like, oh, I'm pregnant. It seemed confusing, like it wasn't clear. Although I know everyone, a lot of people experienced that in the beginning. But I think the reason I felt that way was because something wasn't quite right, even though I didn't really know at the time. So I had the discharge, and then the day that I would have been 4 weeks, I guess, and 2 days pregnant, according to medical standards, which would just really be 2 weeks and 2 days actually with anything going on inside my body. I definitely had a period, but it was also a miscarriage because I was pregnant. It was a chemical pregnancy for sure. I felt really different. The day that I woke up for that, I didn't feel pregnant anymore. I felt like I had energy because before the 2 weeks before that, I had not much energy. I was sleepy all the time and in a weird way where my body felt really heavy. And I felt super emotional. And I'm an emotional person anyway, but I felt extra emotional. Like crying meltdowns. I had a couple crying meltdowns. But I could tell that it wasn't about anything. There wasn't really a trigger. It was just random. So I was like, this is hormonal, not just me being emotional. Even though probably most of the time when I'm emotional, it's because it's hormonal too. But so I felt that way before. And the day that I woke up, it was October 13th. It was, day 16. And I just felt different. I had energy when I got out of bed in the morning, and I felt light. And I realized, I guess I didn't realize this before, but after I felt different that day, I realized that before I had felt a little heavier, like weightier, and almost like my body felt bigger. And I know it wasn't, but it just felt like it was almost a little meatier. And that day I felt leaner and more muscular. Very strange. Could all be very psychological, but I don't think so. I think it was a hormonal, your hormones are changing during all of this. And of course my hormones hadn't changed a ton because from what I can tell, the embryo hadn't, I guess the blastocyst hadn't even fully implanted. And that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it was trying to implant. That's why the implantation bleeding started. But it didn't succeed for whatever reason. And when you look up the statistics for this, it's a really large percentage of people's pregnancies end this way. Some numbers say 75% of pregnancies end in a miscarriage. But many of them are this really early, maybe not even considered a miscarriage. They're what's called chemical pregnancy, where it never even implanted. It's just your chemicals and your hormones are changing. And that's what happened in my case. But I felt different that morning. And my uterus also, I don't really have heavy cramping during my period. That morning when I wiped, there was a little bit more red, which made me a little nervous. And I just felt like my uterus was in a vice, was in a clamp, and I don't feel like that usually. And so I thought, this could be bad. It doesn't feel right. I've heard women tell stories that they felt like they were going to have a period in the beginning of the pregnancy and they were nervous, but they didn't. I think it's just different for everyone. But for me, and I just had a feeling I wasn't pregnant anymore. If I'd even ever been, which I think that's different. Some days I feel like, yes, I was pregnant, and some days I feel like, no, I wasn't. It was the beginning. And, but that just depends on how you feel about what makes a pregnancy and when. Is it a psychological feeling about it? Is it an emotional feeling? Is it, when the baby is a baby, or when it starts to look like a person, not like a blob? It was still a blob. It was still a tiny little circle thing. And it was really interesting too. I had some pretty vivid feelings about it being a boy, which was pretty interesting because I have hoped for a girl. And Jason too has been like, oh, it'd be nice to have a girl first. But it was really interesting. I just kept thinking of a boy. And like I said, it could all be psychological, but you don't know. So my uterus felt like it was in a vice, and then I started like a real period, and it wasn't heavier than a normal period, probably because I'd already had a lot of, discharge, even though it was very light and brown before. It was a slightly different texture. I feel like it was a little bit thicker, maybe, very red, but it wasn't heavier, and it lasted maybe 2 days. And then a few days after that, maybe 3 days after that, I stopped bleeding altogether, and my body seems normal again, although I don't think I'm emotionally normal. So I can't tell exactly. I think the day it happened, I was really, really, really upset. And of course I wonder what's wrong with me. And, a lot of women wonder that. Nothing's wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you if you're experiencing this either. It's the body's way of taking care of itself. And there are a lot of mistakes that are made when you copy a huge genetic code for a baby. And it's hard to get it to line up. It can be a lot of mistakes. It can be chromosomal, or it can just be a copy problem. Because think about how many times the cells have to divide and copy the DNA. A ton. So it could have just been that. Of course, I'm slightly afraid, like my uterus is inhospitable. Every possible fear you could have, I feel like I'm having right now. But I don't feel like I'm really afraid. I think I'm just superficially afraid somehow. Like I feel like I should be, even though I don't think I really am. But it's been a strange time. I've sort of grieved. I've sort of not. I've sort of felt grateful and happy that my body knows how to take care of itself and clean out and, make the right choice, because I believe in nature. I believe in reasons for things. I believe in the universe taking care of me and my body and stuff. So it's been a really interesting ride.